Welcome to today's webinar, Innovative Strategies for Meeting the Needs of Youth with Disabilities, presented by Curtis Richards. My name is Greg Nagy, and I am the Virtual Learning Community Manager from The Ohio State University, who provides technical support for the STEM Equity Pipeline project. Before we start the presentation, I would like to go over some housekeeping items for this webinar. This webinar is scheduled to last roughly 1 hour, and is being recorded in order to view this presentation in its entirety later. The recorded webinar will be available in the next few days on the stemequitypipeline.org website. As you've already found out, you'll be watching the presenter present slides through the Adobe Connect interface while listening to him talk over your computer speakers. All the participants' microphones have been automatically muted. You can make the presentation larger by clicking the full screen button at the top of your Adobe Connect window. You can also download the slides from the Files pod at the bottom left of your Adobe Connect window. Click on the file you want to download, then click the Download Files button. This will open the file as a link in a different tab in your browser. The presenter will answer questions during and after the presentation. However, we can take questions at any time. This is how we take questions. At any time during the presentation, you may submit a question by typing your question in the chat pod at the bottom of the Adobe Connect window. We will read and respond to these questions at the end of the presentation and during the presentation. I would like to start the webinar by introducing Freda Walker, consultant for the STEM Equity Pipeline project. Freda? Freda, I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Thank you. Good afternoon, and welcome to the fourth webinar in this series, Non-Traditional Pathways. These webinars highlight program strategies that work and are ones that you can implement. Support for the webinar series is from the Minnesota Department of Education and the Minnesota State Colleges and Universities. They fund these webinars to inform all who have a role in helping students understand successful paths to high-skill, high-wage, and high-demand jobs. On their behalf, I welcome each of you and our presenter, Curtis Richards. Additional funding is from NAEP, the National Alliance for Partnerships and Equity, and the National Science Foundation. I'd like to start by asking how you heard about this webinar, and this is a poll, so Greg is going to post a poll and you can answer, and you can see that we want you to chat if you heard from a listserv. We'd like to know which listserv, or at a conference, which conference, a newsletter, which newsletter, etc. Okay, can we post? Okay, let's get into answering. You can see that you may have to slide down your on the right so that you're able to see all the answers. Okay, Greg, let's broadcast the results. It looks like the majority had an email from a colleague. Then the next set or group that we have the highest is from the STEM Equity Pipeline mailing list. We do have some from other listservs, and if you can be chatting and tell me which listservs, I would appreciate that information. We've got two people that actually had an announcement at one at a conference and two in the Pipeline Press. And we have some from the STEM Equity Pipeline website. So thank you for those answers, and I'll just be looking at the chat in a little bit after we move on. Okay, Greg, let's shut the, thank you. This and all the past webinars are archived on the stemequitypipeline.org website. I also want to tell you that we have a certificate of completion, and at the very end of this webinar you can fill out the evaluation and the form for the completion if you need a certificate. We always have a resource document, and today the resource document is down under Files, and the name of it is Innovative Strategies for Students with Disabilities. It's a PDF, and it's the only thing that you'll need to download today. There are some hyperlinks in this resource for all the resources that the presenter will be giving you today, and also his contact information. So please go ahead and download that in the Files section. We have a chat function, and I can already see that different people are using the chat function. We appreciate that, and please put all your questions in. We actually are going to take some questions during the presentation today and also at the end. This next poll I'd like to take is we'd like to know who is actually participating in today's webinar. So Greg, will you post the poll? And will the audience please answer? Okay, Greg, let's see, let's post. I think we're pretty close. Most people have answered. And I can see that it's pretty equal. We have school and college administrators, we have career and technical directors and coordinators, we have teacher and faculty members, counselors and student services, state agency staff, and others. And it's sort of equally divided. So we appreciate all those. I've asked you to chat for some of the different answers that you've given so that we'll know who you are. I can see that people are chatting, so thank you. Let's move to the next slide. Thank you. I'd like to also know if there's anyone else watching with you. We've found that many times it's not just one person at a computer watching the webinar, so let's post this one and get the audience to answer. Okay, Greg, let's post the results. It looks like today that we have most people watching by themselves, but we have one group of 4. So if that group could just tell me what agency you're with, I would appreciate that information. And we can take the poll down now. This is the last poll that I'd like to take, and it will help inform our presenter, Curtis. It says, I or the folks watching this webinar with me currently work directly with youth with disabilities. And you can see we'd just like to know how often most of you are working with students or youth with disabilities. Let's close the poll, and if the audience can answer, please. Okay, we still have a few answering here. Okay, let's broadcast the results. We have about 22% of you all that work every day with youth with disabilities. We have about 8.5% work most days, and 11.4% a few days, and 57% work with programs providing services with youth with disabilities. So, Curtis, that'll give you an idea who's on. It is a pleasure today to introduce Curtis Richard. He has extensive background and experience in this area. So, Curtis, you're on.
Thank you very much, Freda. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you.
Excellent. Again, I just want to thank you and the folks at NAEP for inviting us to participate in this and help lead this webinar. We're always looking for new audiences, and I definitely appreciate you running the poll so we have a sense of how many folks in this session have some understanding of disability. I think as we go through this, then hopefully some of what I'm going to have to say will be familiar, but we've really tried to put together a webinar for you that will be cover a number of issues so that we want to establish sort of a base understanding around working with young people with disabilities, move into a conversation around universal design for learning, and then really focus on career development issues and strategies. And as Fred told you, the resource for you to download is very rich with, and you will see it as we go through this presentation, is very rich with a lot of resources for you to click on and learn more and see more. I am with an organization that's celebrating its 50th anniversary here in Washington, D.C., called the Institute for Educational Leadership, where I run the center that focuses on the workforce development system. In that capacity, we have a number of technical assistance centers that we run, funded by either the Department of Labor or the Department of Justice, focusing on young people in the transition ages, that being sort of 12 to 25, 30-ish neighborhood. And the one under which we've been doing this work that I'm going to be talking a lot about today is the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability for Youth, funded by the Department of Labor's Office of Disability Employment Policy. We are in our 12th year of existence, so we've got a lot of research, a lot of writing, a lot of publications under our belt, a lot of which we're going to point you to today as references in resources. As I said, we're a National Technical Assistance Center that really tries to zero in on helping folks understand how to move young people from school to work. Our primary audience is the workforce development system, which, as we define it, because we're talking about young people, also includes all of you in the education field, as well as community-based organizations. A couple of our partners that are important to point out here is the University of Minnesota, has been with us since the very beginning. Transcend Inc. here in Maryland, also been with us since the beginning. Pacer Center, which is a family-focused center, also housed in Minnesota, really provides us the family perspective. And Boston University, which is really helping us with a whole strand of work around career development and individualized learning plans that exist in a number of states that Boston U has been helping us lead. Much of what we're going to do later in the third prong of this conversation today is based on the work that Boston's been helping us with. When we got started over a decade ago, what we did is we sort of backed up and said, what do we know all young people need in order to make a successful transition from school to work, from home to community? You know, when we looked across the spectrum, the whole school to work movement and what were the findings out of that, there had been a lot of work done in the transition arena as it related to special education, vocational rehabilitation, mental health issues. There was a lot of work done in the youth development arena, so we sort of backed up and said, what do we know all young people need? And if you see, I think you can read it barely over here, the pretty little blue guideposts. We call this our guideposts for success, and we broke everything down into five basic categories. That is the set of things you need around schooling, the set of things you need around getting ready to go to work, the set of things around youth development, which if you think about it, that age range is very broad, so there's a lot of developmental activities that are occurring. Then there's a whole set of things that young people need to get connected to in order to make a successful transition, not just referred to, but connected to. And then you can't have this conversation without including families and other caring adults. And so what we did that for what all young people need, and then the extra set of things that young people with disabilities need. We call that our guideposts for success. And then we went deeper and did a lot more work around young people with learning disabilities, a whole guide on young people with learning disabilities, a whole guide on young people with mental health issues, a similar guide around youth involved in the juvenile justice system and youth involved in the foster care system. There at the bottom you see the link, and again we'll share more of those as we go on. But our guidepost for success really is the base of all of our work, and then we start zeroing in deeper across each of these. Why is this even important? We call this the stubborn dilemma, because what we know from all the research, from years of research, from years of experience, is that young people with disabilities are far more likely to drop out of school, far less likely to go to college, far more likely to wind up getting involved in the juvenile justice system in some fashion. That they also are 3 times more likely to live a life of poverty, oftentimes on Social Security or some other government subsidy program. And we know that the unemployment rate for people with disabilities has been staggeringly high for decades. Now, we know this from polling data. We now have a little better data, although it's not complete, because for the first time in our history, in the last couple of years, the Department of Labor is now regularly reporting on the labor participation rate on a monthly basis, just as they do for everybody else. So when you hear that the unemployment rate is 7.6%, 6.7%, whatever it is for your state, we also now can have a national number of what at least folks with disabilities who are in the labor force or out of the labor force. That doesn't include a whole host of other people that aren't even working and haven't been working. So the 70% number is sort of the ballpark that we use. And as you can see, the stubborn dilemma is obviously pretty stark, but there really are a lot of good activities going on, much of which we're going to try to talk about here. But the real point is we don't have any real system in this country that helps young people make that transition. We have the career tech ed folks, we have the general ed folks, we have the special ed folks, we have the voc rehab system, we have the WIA Title I people, the employment training people, we have the mental health people, we have the juvenile justice people, but we don't have a system. Each of those pieces, each of those particular systems have their own issues that they're working with, but we don't really have a comprehensive system that we need to be putting in place to really help make these successful transitions and sort of work across boundaries, if you will. So with that bias and orientation, what we wanted to do is to zero in on a couple of disability populations that you are most likely to be interacting with, whether they're diagnosed or undiagnosed. And that's one of the things that's important to note, is that in special education in school, what we are seeing is the bulk of the students who are in special ed have either some sort of a mental health issue, and you can see these awful numbers here, or they have some sort of a learning disability. And we also know that a lot of both learning disabilities and mental health issues go undiagnosed. And in fact, a lot of them wind up getting caught in college, picked up in college as they move to a community college, or they move to an adult ed program, if they're caught at all. One of the important things to note about youth with mental health issues is that there are different definitions depending on the system. So the child mental health system or the adult mental health system is going to have a more liberal definition of what it means to be a person with a mental health issue than the special education system, meaning for special ed purposes, to be considered somebody with a mental health issue, it has to impact your ability to learn, and the same is true for learning disabilities. I wanted to give you just sort of a, you may or may not know that you've got folks with mental health issues in your classes or in your programs. So I wanted to give you just sort of a quick checklist of potential issues that you may see, signs that you may see of folks that may give you the tip that you've got somebody with some kind of a mental health issue that you should be paying attention to, and maybe even trying to figure out additional resources to keep or get them more assistance or supports. Likewise, when we get into what is a young person with a learning disability, again, some pretty staggering numbers, as you can see here, and again, a lot that wind up not getting even diagnosed. I wanted you to see here the number of students graduating, the percentage of students graduating with regular diplomas, because it's very, very possible and important for folks to get regular diplomas. And what do we really mean by learning disabilities? And frankly, one way to think about it is that the way people think, the way their mind processes, it's just that they're wired a bit differently than other people are. And there's some things that are going to be difficulties in reading, difficulties in spelling, difficulties in doing math, transposing numbers. They're going to be, they can also be, just simple processing issues. What goes in, what gets taken in by the eyes or by the ears comes back out the fingers a little bit differently than what went in. So, it really is sort of processing stuff. And again, we wanted to give you just a quick, just a quick list of potential ways that you may, or signs that you may pick up some hints of somebody who's, just really not remembering things very well, or just is having a real difficult time following instructions, or, is transposing letters, or you discover that the reading and writing issues are just not as strong as they should be. These can all be sort of tips for you that you may have some sort of a learning disability occurring. And I think this was the point at which, yes, we wanted to stop right here if we could, and see if there are any disability-related questions about conditions or types of disabilities or whatever before we move into the next section around universal design for learning.
Curtis, this is Freda, and there is one question, and some people are typing. The one question right now is, when you say youth, what ages are you speaking about?
Good question. We tend to talk about youth as early as 12, sort of middle school years, high school years, college and post high school, post college years. So roughly 12 to 25. And we use those constructs because that's when you look at eligibility purposes for special ed, you look at eligibility purposes under WIA, the Workforce Investment Act, Titles I, you have younger, so it tends to be the ages for eligibility purposes for foster care programs, etc. So think about middle school through the college years. The other thing I wanted to point out, I meant to mention this in the very beginning, is I am a person with a visual impairment, and so I'm using assistive technology to be able to help do this webinar, which may be what's causing some delays in my going through each slide.
Curtis, everything's working very well, and we appreciate what you're doing. I've got a variety of questions coming in. This is our next one. Have you heard the term neurodiversity? Is it an umbrella term covering some types of disability? What does it cover, and does your organization accept this term?
So, you just raised the issue of proper language around folks with disabilities. I am a disability rights advocate, and so my base of what I believe we should be doing and the language that we should be using is definitely people first language. That is, I am a person with a visual impairment. I could tell you I am blind. That's one way to put it. I'm not totally blind, so I use visual impairment, but I use person first because I am me and I happen to have a visual impairment. The term, yes, I've heard the term neurodiversity. It is a nouveau language to try to describe folks with mental health issues, and frankly, in the various disability categories, folks with mental health issues are the ones that are struggling the most with what to be called. Some people like to be called psychological survivor or psychiatric survivor, excuse me. Some like to be, they don't like to be considered people with disabilities, that language at all. They want their own language. So, you sort of have to figure out, what's appropriate and what are the individual preferences.
Thank you. Our next question. What do we know about the effects of gender and race or ethnicity and mental health and learning disabilities?
I'm not even sure I'm qualified to answer that question.
Let me ask it. Let me
I don't
add
think we
to
have any
that.
research. I don't think we have any research in our guide that claims that there's a correlation between learning disability and gender, learning disability and race. You know, we certainly know that in special education and in the juvenile justice system, we have an overrepresentation, particularly of African Americans, who are being you know, diagnosed with or being dubbed as having a learning disability or having a mental health issue. We know there's overrepresentation, but I don't think that there's scientific research that says that there's a correlation.
Thank you. I would ask the audience if any of you do know of any research that you would type that into the search function. And I can see that Barb Bitters is typing, so she may have some resource for us to actually look at.
Good.
And
Good.
I'm going to wait until she gets through typing, I think, to see what she says, and then we can move on.
Great. And I think later on one of the slides I'm going to show you is the citation for our learning disabilities and our mental health guides that you can tap and tear apart.
Barb is saying that there is also an overrepresentation of males in learning disabilities. We'll look for a source and try to share it. Thank you, Barb. Okay, we can move on, Curtis, to your next slide. And
how are we doing on time, Freda?
We still have like 20, 30, almost about 25 minutes, so I think we're doing fine.
Okay, I need to move faster is what that tells me. All right, so we wanted to just spend a few minutes on this concept called universal design for learning. I'm hoping that certainly all of you being educators have at least heard of it. Maybe some of you are even practicing it or testing it out and trying to figure it out. But universal design for learning has now been embedded in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. There is a movement afloat to embed it even further into the Elementary Secondary Education Act when it gets approved. And so I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes, given who you folks are, and talk a little bit about universal design for learning. I will say that I am not the expert. I've certainly done some reading and a bit of writing on the topic, but it's really important as we think about how disengaged young people are from learning in the traditional classroom. This is a strategy that people believe is not just a disability strategy. It may have started out that way, but they're finding it a lot more effective for having total youth engagement in learning in the classroom. And the way to think about it, as you see from this particular slide, is how does somebody receive the information? How does somebody process the information, and then how does somebody spit it back out? So how does it get translated by them? And as you're designing your curricula, you're designing your projects, your course lectures and instructions, you really want to make sure that you're appealing to all three of these modes for learning and expressing. Here we go a little bit deeper into thinking about, as you're designing, what's the class climate, what's the interaction going to be, what's the physical environment look like, so that you're able to be have a multiple tie in multiple options here, so that you're able to have a flexible design, flexible delivery of instruction, that you're getting the specific feedback and regular feedback, that the young person is engaged, etc. The strategy instruction, this is a sort of subset of what folks really believe is working here, is helping the young person really understand how they learn as you're doing this, and getting them more engaged and taking control of how they're learning, so that they're being self-regulated, so that they're planning, they're monitoring their own activities, they're thinking through what they've done and how they've done it. So you're appealing to all three senses, if you will, and getting them engaged in how they are learning. And here we wanted to just give you a sense of some of these strategies, right? So, you know, teaching to the important skills, trying to get them to realize, and you to realize, you don't need to teach to all 12 skills, but zero in on 6, zero in on 3. Teach less is better is the motto. Make sure you're being very explicit about what you're teaching. Make sure that you've got, you know, that it's contextual, etc. Yeah, so this is the last one here. The thought leaders around universal design for learning, if you folks have not heard or aren't familiar, or if you want to go much deeper, are the people up at CAST. They are the ones that have helped really do the research and done a ton of writing on it. And so here you see several resources around universal design for learning. I think let's given the time, I want to just keep moving along and get into the career development discussion. That is what we really wanted to zero in on today. Again, under the way we think about career development here, based on our research, and as I said earlier, the work we've been doing with Boston U around these individualized learning plans that now exist in something like 37 states plus the District of Columbia, is that there's sort of 3 phases to it, and they don't necessarily happen linearly, but there's the self-exploration phase where the young person is really doing sort of the interest inventory issues, learning about what, you know, his or her values are, what his or her strengths are, you know, what are the interests, in a formal and sometimes an informal way. Then there's the career development or the career exploration phase, in which folks are learning then how to apply their interests and their values to potential careers and finding out what careers are out there. And you're going to see examples of what it is we mean here. And then there is something that we probably all could use, even at my age and stage, which is career planning and management. You know, developing the work habits, being able to, you know, be prepared to go to work, to keep my, you know, my planning process in place for what my next move is, and make sure I've got everything in order and those sort of things. So that's the 3 phases of career development that we talk about. So earlier, remember, I mentioned that we did all our work is based on the Guideposts for Success. This is the second guidepost that I mentioned, that is the career preparatory career development section. And here you see the set of things that all young people need. You know, here the career exploration and kinds of things that we're talking about: site visits, guest speakers, job shadowing, includes learning about education and employment, entry requirements, really important, opportunities to practice work, whether it's through community service or internships or whatever, and then one that people tend to forget about, but we classify under the career planning. Additionally, there's a special set of things young people with disabilities need to learn as part of this particular domain, and that really is understanding if they're on benefits, if they're on Medicaid, or they're on Social Security. They need to understand the interaction between working and earning a paycheck and getting, you know, the point at which they get off benefits, or they wind up losing their health care. So they've got to understand the interaction between, and there are a whole cadre of people that are out there trained by Social Security to help people do that. Then there are also issues around what kinds of accommodations they need that they've been using. Maybe they've been using some accommodations in schools, but how are they going to work in the workplace? How do they know how to find them, ask for them formally? What are their rights? What's the process that they need to go through to request accommodations? So what I now want to sort of walk through, and I'm going to move fairly quickly here, but you have all of this in the download, is we wanted to give you all some practical live examples of how these domains are being addressed by programs around the country. We spent a lot of time kind of trying to find what we consider to be good practices. We don't talk about best practices because there's no agreement on what we mean by a best practice. So we tend to talk about innovative strategies or promising practices, those sorts of things. And so what I'm going to walk through quickly is some of our favorite promising and innovative practices that exist. So, and Fred actually liked this very first one because it's in her home territory. Under self-exploration, right? The Shasta folks that have created their own instrument for doing some self-assessment. The folks here at Tech Now in Oklahoma used a state one. The folks here, as you see, there's another one down in Florida where they tapped into the state's career information system and used this values sorter that the state of Florida offered. There are a number of things, and we'll show you some more that folks can tap into. This is a list of some resources, some of which we have developed, some of which were developed, as you see here. You know, the one used by Utah, ONET, that is available. Hopefully, most of you know about the ONET profiler. And again, down at the bottom, where we have what we call a how-to guide. I keep mentioning these individualized learning plans. What we wound up developing was a how-to guide for educators to use in the classroom to be able to tie back to all of these areas. And so everything that's on this list here is embedded in that how-to guide that you see referenced here at the bottom. A couple of other resources that we've done around self-exploration that you'll be able to download it if you like. Then we get into the career exploration, and this first one actually happens to be one of my favorite. I love this story where this happens to be a program for youth with mental health issues, and what they wind up doing is taking the young people on a tour of the airport, the Long Beach airport, and instead of showing them just the 5 or 6 jobs that you see with people, you know, who are up front, they show them 27 jobs that exist all around the airport. What's all of the stuff that goes on behind the scenes? And then they take the young people back and they spend time talking about what they learned, what interests. Young people are like, whoa, I didn't realize I could do that. I didn't realize all that occurred. Maybe I could do some security work. I don't have to be a TSA agent, but I could be the person helping look at the camera behind the scenes, those sorts of things. So this is what we mean by a site visit. We love this one up here in Massachusetts as well, where they creatively do, you know, bring businesses together that offer an opportunity to do job shadowing, and they make it fun for the young people, not just hanging out in an office all day, but they do a whole scavenger hunt connected to the job shadow work. And then this other one where in New Hampshire, where you really bring employers to come in and do presentations to the young folks, helping them understand the connectedness between the STEM careers, basically. So those are a couple of our favorite opportunities to do the career exploration. Again, here are some lessons and activities that are built in to do some career exploration in the classroom, built into the how-to guide. And then three other resources that we have developed or that have been developed by some others that we think are worth your taking a look at. Then we get into the career planning and management section around soft skills, and we wanted to show you a couple of different variations on folks, how some programs are using some soft skill instruction. I'm going to move a little bit quicker here because I think we're getting short on time. Again, under planning and
Curtis?
management. Oh, yes, ma'am.
This is Freda, and we still have about 15 minutes for the hour, and if we go over maybe 5 minutes, it's okay. We have multiple people typing questions, so I know you'll have some at the end, but we're doing good, so just keep moving on.
All right. Well, I know I talk too fast sometimes too. So, all right. Thank you, Freda. So here, just wanted to give you some examples of work experiences. And remember, it's so important that the young person and that the young person have an opportunity to practice work before leaving school, before leaving, you know, the college environment. And frankly, a lot of folks with disabilities don't get those opportunities because they're too, you know, they're slower at studying, or they're, you know, having to worry about healthcare issues. So we really want to make sure that there are opportunities to experience work. Here we get into some of the skill building exercises that folks need to go through, including work-based learning, learning about financial literacy and management issues, and again, a couple of papers that we have done, a couple of where we've really tried to do a roundup of good practices. There is a whole program that some of you may have heard of called High School High Tech, been around since the 80s. It exists at varying levels right now, and we even have a High School High Tech manual that has a lot more detail on how to build a program. Again, some more skill planning. Want to point out this particular guide on internships is aimed at young people. So if a young person is thinking about doing an internship, it kind of really helps the person think through what that person needs to do to get there. So it's a real good youth-focused resource. Soft skills, if you haven't heard about it, there is a fairly new, it's been on the street I think about a year now, soft skills curricula that's been developed by my funder, the Office of Disability Employment Policy at the Department of Labor, called Skills to Pay the Bills. It was vetted around the country and has now been released. And frankly, I know there are a number of school folks that have taken the Skills to Pay the Bills and have actually broken it down into, because it's a whole set of activities, soft skill building activities, and they've broken it down into semester-long programs. So that's really worth taking a look at. I did want to say a word here about disclosure. That is how, when getting a young person, no matter what age or stage they are at, to understand and talk about their disability so that they know when and where and how. Because certainly while you're in the middle school and high school years, if you're in special education, you're at those awkward adolescent years where you just want to fit in, you don't want to draw attention, so you're not likely to want to talk about your disability. But once you leave school and you get into the adult world, the college world, suddenly rights and responsibilities kick in and entitlements disappear. And so we really like to spend some energy getting young people to understand the difference in the time and the difference about what you need to say when you're going through an interview versus when you get on the job, that you don't want to just not disclose your learning disability or your mental health issue until you're not performing in the workplace. That's very dangerous and can lead you to get fired, legitimately fired, as opposed to asking for accommodations and when. So disclosure is an important piece of youth development here. We have 4 resources here, sorry. One of which is getting young people to understand what they're doing on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn, how they may be inadvertently disclosing that may cause them some issues. It's not just about the kids who are posing with pictures of their latest party and all the beer bottles, but it's also what you're saying about your own disability or whatever pictures you're posting or whatever. So there's some cyber disclosure issues to think through. The first one here is a workbook aimed at young people to be able to walk through and learn different issues around disclosing in school, work, and importantly in the community. And the companion one is for folks like you, the adults, the caring adults, to be able to work through those issues with the young people. If you haven't heard of it, the Job Accommodation Network is an excellent resource for you, for any of folks to be able to go to and ask questions about specific accommodations. I have a student who has lupus who wants to understand how she is going to be able to do a receptionist job. What kinds of accommodations should we be thinking about? Those are the kinds of questions the job accommodation can answer. Okay, just quickly, I told you here is our work on youth with learning disabilities. This is the guide and companion materials to it. Similarly, we've got the guide and the companion materials around youth with mental health issues. I wanted you also to see how to reach me if you need to after this webinar. If you've got any questions or issues or comments, we're very open to criticisms, and tell us new resources as you look through our how-to guide. Particularly, we're going to be updating that, so if you all have resources you think we should incorporate, please let us know, and I'm going to stop babbling with that and see if we have any questions.
Thank you, Curtis. We do have some questions. What are your thoughts on using the Myers-Briggs as a self-exploration tool?
I don't think it's a bad tool to be used for people to understand themselves. Where I have troubles with the Myers-Briggs, or where we have troubles with the Myers-Briggs, is that people then get pigeonholed into certain categories. But it's certainly helpful to learn. It's certainly helpful for folks to learn about themselves.
Thank you. Our next question, Sally is asking, or stating, Cooter Navigator is also a good tool to use. And I don't know if you know about that one, but she's suggesting it's a good one to use.
Yes, there are a number of vendors out there. Cooter is one. Wisconsin has another one. Career Cruising is another one. Naviance, there are a number. And because we're federally funded, we don't promote one vendor over another. But there are excellent tools that some of which cost more than others. And we like to try to point people first to the free stuff, and then secondly towards a variety of vendors.
Thank you. This question is from Eva, and she's asking, I think, of the group as well as you, but are there any states still using the Discovering Your Genius model on non-traditional ways of job search and interviewing for older youth and adults with special needs, such as developmental needs, etc.? And I don't know if you're aware of that particular resource, but she's asking if other states, if they're using it, if they might chat in the chat function. Do you know of that resource, Richard?
I've not heard it by that name.
Okay, Curtis?
There is a relatively new model for self-discovery or self-exploration that just goes by the name Discovery, that was created by Mark Gold and Associates. Mike Callahan is kind of the lead trainer, lead developer on that, and it is really aimed at young people with the most significant disabilities, and we would certainly classify that in the self-exploration phase. The key, though, that you want to think about in the self-exploration phase is that the tools really need to be validated. You need to make sure that you're using appropriately validated assessment instruments, of which Mark Gold and Associates Discovery process is, because Discovery really mixes paper and pencil with interview kinds of techniques and observational techniques.
Okay, thank you. This one is from Charlotte, and she said, reach out to Dr. Pedro Nogueira at New York University Metro Center on equity for links between race and ED/LD students. And she gives an actual link there. So I don't know if you, yeah,
no,
okay.
That's excellent. Thank you very much.
Our next, I've got some people typing, but I'm just going to read this one to you. It says, Curtis, this is from Barb, great overview presentation with lots of links. I would love for NAEP, this is one of the sponsoring organizations, to work with you on gender and race and ethnicity issues and resources.
We'd be more than welcome.
Let's see. Yes, okay, now let's see. The next one says, can you spell the name Mark G? I don't know.
M-A-R-C, Gold, G-O-L-D, and Associates. And if you look up Michael Callahan, C-A-L-L-I-H-A-N, he's the fellow running the organization. He's all over the place on discovery and an excellent resource, particularly around youth and adults with significant disabilities.
Thank you. We have another one that's asking, is it possible for us to have the notes from this webinar? And I don't normally send the notes out, but it's certainly something that we could post. I will work with Greg about that. They're saying thank you, and it was great information just because you're answering the questions, but I've got a variety of people typing. One is saying a lot of great resources, thanks. And then Eva has actually given the link for discovering your personal genius, so the link is there. Charlie is saying thank you very much for the great presentation and all the information provided, and I still have people typing, so we'll just wait till those come in.
I don't know, is that a good sign or a bad sign?
It's a good sign. I like it when people are chatting and typing. Let's see. Thank you for sending out the notes. They're saying great webinar. And let's see. Thank you very much for the great presentation, all the information provided. Maybe I already said that one. I think, let's see. Thank you. I will pass the information along to others in our school district. And we have one more person typing, so we'll let people finish their typing. Me too, so that's excellent for us to know that you are sharing this information and passing it out to more people. I think that in our, I'd really appreciate it if when we do our evaluation that you indicate that information, because we do ask that as a follow-up. I have Sally typing now. Let's see. I don't know if anyone else is, if that's coming through yet. Oh, did you say at the beginning that the PowerPoint could be downloaded? Yes, Sally. I'd like for everyone to make sure they download this PowerPoint because it's over on the left-hand side of this chat. You'll see there's a menu called Files, and underneath you'll see a PDF. If you highlight that PDF and then hit Download, it will bring up another window in your another window where you can download and say yes to download it. And this one's important to download because it has so many references that are hyperlinks to the resources that were given by Curtis today. Lynn Reha is saying thanks very much for such rich information. And I can see that Charlotte is typing and Sally is typing, and there are multiple people typing. So we'll just give them a chance. Sally says, thank you. I just did the download. So I still have multiple people typing. Charlotte is saying it's very easy to download, very easy, excellent presentation. Beverly, good information, and the PowerPoint presentation is excellent resource. Wait a minute, to keep on hand. And that may be it. Okay, well.
I'm certainly pleased that everybody has, really likes the fact that we have all those resources. I think that's really great.
Yes, it is. I'm going to move the slide now. We've done time for questions and answers. I've done that. I do have one more question that's come up. It says, Curtis, what issues is your organization working on regarding public policy and grant programs? So why don't you answer that one before I move to the last few slides.
Well, actually, that's an interesting question because we have spent a lot of time both through coalitions that we belong to and individually providing assistance on the Hill, trying to help get some of the emphasis on all of the guidepost areas, and particularly around the career development areas, built into IDEA, built into ESEA, built into WIA, So there's a number of, and there's even a whole package of bills, 3 bills that were introduced called the TEAM Act by Congressman Harper, much of which draws upon the work that we've been doing here under the collaborative, the National Collaborative on Workforce and Disability for Youth. A lot of those issues have gotten picked up and built into draft proposals, or the Senate version of the WIA reauthorization. There's a movement to put some of it into the ESEA reauthorization on the House side. So there's a lot of activity sort of behind the scenes through coalitions, as I said, and then when we get invited up for, and then the other thing that I would mention is there is a group of mid-level managers inside of multiple federal agencies who have come together called Partners in Transition. There was a GAO report issued last August that was highly critical of the lack of coordination and the lack of collaboration primarily amongst Social Security, Health and Human Services, Education, and Labor, and that has really sparked the federal Partners in Transition to step up their work. In fact, some of you may have even participated in a recent, they had an open chat about 3-4 months ago where they were trying to get input from the community. So, you know, it's not just the policy issues that you know, inside of Congress, but also across the different agencies that we're spending a lot of time working on. One of them we're doing as we speak is all revolving around the multiple forms of measures and metrics that these different systems use, and you're going to hear and see a lot more about that in about 6 months. So it's a great question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Curtis. And that brings me to thinking about one of the things I wondered is will it take in the United States to have a comprehensive system for transitions for youth with disabilities. I don't know if your organization is working on that, or how, I mean, these different groups that you've said. Yeah, right.
Well,
so thank you so much. Let's see, let's move forward. Thank you so much, Curtis. I feel like that I learned a lot of information, particularly about the resources, but just your guideposts for success. I think sometimes we have limited resources, and to know that they're there. Also talking about self-regulation, rights and responsibilities of youth with disabilities. So I'm very grateful for everything that you shared with us today, and I plan to share it with my local school district. I want to also thank the Minnesota Department of Education and Minnesota State Colleges and Universities, NAEP, and the National Science Foundation. Please join our virtual learning community and view archived webinars. Again, that's on the stemequitypipeline.org. Also, you can join NAEP at their Professional Development Institute, April 7th through the 10th, 2014 in Arlington, Virginia. You can still register. We'd love to have you there. Thanks for participating in this webinar series. We look forward to your participation in the future webinars. We have our last one in April, and it's going to be a discussion and focused on parent involvement. So you'll be getting some information about that. Please complete the certificate of completion. Complete page 2 of the evaluation survey. If you want to have the certificate, I want to tell you that that certificate, it takes about 2 weeks to get the certificates out, and we're going to try this time to send them electronically. So be patient, but if you don't get one, be sure and let us know if you fill out the second page. Also, the evaluation page and the certificate page are administered separately, so the evaluation survey remains anonymous, so please be truthful. It helps us improve the quality of our webinars. Anyway, thanks for sharing the hour with us. Huh? And you're going to read all of them. And have a good afternoon. And Greg, I think you're on now to give us the evaluation survey.
Yep, so thank you everyone for joining us today. Remember, this webinar will be available at the stemequitypipeline.org website homepage and under the Professional Development heading, and then under STEM Equity Pipeline Archive webinars in the next few days. So for the live webinar, I've just put up a short survey, and I'm going to click on it right now, and this will open for most of you in a different tab in your browser. and please complete this for us now. I also send out an email with a link to the survey in case you don't have time to fill it out right now. For the archived webinar, please refer back to your registration email with the link to the survey. So thank you, everyone. This is the end of the webinar.